Welcome to Zook Nukem, another car repair video for you. This is not an Audi. We sold the Audi. This is a 1997 Mazda Protege LX with the 1.5 liter engine. This is about alternator replacement. A couple of tips and tricks that I've discovered as I have been doing that today. First, of course, you want to make sure that it's actually the alternator that is bad. In my case, it was. I did replace about 8 inches of battery cable, which was badly corroded. Definitely recommend you make sure it's the alternator before you replace it. Not because it's that hard on this particular vehicle, but it's a couple $100 of extra expenses you can avoid if you're wrong about the alternator. Please, please, please remember to disconnect the negative battery terminal before starting. I was messing around with things the other day trying to figure out if it really was the alternator for this. When I was undoing the battery post nut on the alternator, I guess I plugged the battery back in. So there was a spark and a pop and I blew a fuse. If you're dumb and like me and you blew a fuse, it was probably the main fuse, which is in here. The 100 amp main fuse. I think it was red before like these ones, but it was 100 amps. Not sure why Mazda did this, but to get the main fuse out, you have to undo 2 bolts that are holding it in. I thought, why on earth would I have to undo bolts to pull it out? Because the other ones, they pull out no problem. You can just pull them and put them back. But the 100 amp main fuse, that one has bolts holding it in. I got a little frustrated and broke the old one even worse, trying to get it out without undoing the bolts. So anyway, you have to do that for this particular model as well. It's an easy job on this particular model. Other Mazdas and other cars probably can be more difficult. Some I guess it could be easier on, but this, I mean, it's literally 2 bolts holding it on, plus the belt, which is right in there, and the 2 electrical connections. Got your main one right there. I accidentally broke that. Don't break it if you can avoid it. I duct taped the one side back together so it still snaps together on the other side. And then the other electrical connection you can see silhouetted back to right there. Just make sure you push it on the tab. That tab is farther into the alternator than you think. It's easy to get out. I started by jacking up the car, getting the wheel off. I always recommend go ahead and jacking it up pretty high. Not much benefit to leaving it down lower, because most of this you'll be doing from under the car. Tip number 1 is when it's together, this is in the way. So I just undo these 2 little bolts, move it up and out of the way. Makes it a lot easier to get down in there. Disconnect the connections, adjust the belt, all that. One other thing, this tiny little vacuum hose from there down to there, that gets in the way. You probably already know that if you change your own oil with this car, but you can just move that out of the way. You can disconnect both ends. What I did is I just kind of rotated it and it stayed up out of the way. And then when you're done, don't forget to put it back or you'll get an engine code that says you have a vacuum leak. Tip number 2, take the axle out of the wheel. When it's all together, this is up and it's just barely too small of a space to get the old alternator out. Here's the axle when it's in position, more or less. Just getting it a couple inches over makes a big difference for being able to get that out. And it's easy to do an axle because I just did axles, but cotter pin and nut there, 2 nuts and bolts here, and then of course the axle nut, and you just tap it out with a drift and then it moves freely. Got a nice big space. Hopefully you have an air tool. There are ways to do it without, but you can look that up on your own. But really it's just 2 bolts that are mechanically holding the alternator in place and the belt.